Between reports of electroshocks without anesthesia, wards sealed for administrative reasons, and restraint therapies that lasted longer than the night, a collection of pain was formed that didn't fit in the archives. It's a case reel, and what you're about to hear is not an urban legend, but the story of how a psychiatric hospital transformed the word treatment into an echo that still echoes through ancient walls today. The Adauto Botelho opened in 1954 with a modern twist, spacious. Courtyards, symmetrical pavilions, a city within a city. Official documents touted comprehensive care, triage, hospitalization, rehabilitation. However, those who lived nearby recalled something else: shouting at night, short sirens, trucks arriving full and leaving empty. The architecture was functional for control, not affection. Heavy doors, narrow passages, tall windows with double bars. The fluorescent light made the floor reflect a white that didn't warm anyone. The inmates came by many. Paths, rushed medical referrals, exhausted family members, court decisions, and in some cases, social convenience. The inconvenient neighbor, the woman who disobeyed, the bothersome alcoholic, the orphan left on the register. The diagnosis became a rubber stamp: psychosis, confusional state, debility. It took little to get in, almost nothing to get out. At the admissions desk, identities seemed to undergo a second screening. Names written in indecipherable handwriting, estimated, ages, loose pasts. Coming from Santa Candida, rescued at the bus station, no family. When a file was missing, another was created. When there were two files for a person, the most suitable one was chosen. Administrative truth shaped human truth. Routines swallowed up time. Early morning with medication, morning with cold showers, afternoon with lines for procedures, night with counting and silence. The word therapy became an umbrella term for chemical containment, isolation, and, on scheduled days, electroshocks. Many professionals tried to do the right thing: nurses who whispered names, doctors who reduced doses, staff who hid photos in their pockets to restore memories. But the system, it was a courtyard bigger than any goodwill. And the gate at the end of the day always reminded us: many people enter, few people return to tell the story. In the reports, the word protocol justified everything: standard procedure, appropriate conduct, pharmacological adjustment. In the hallway, however, the protocol had a different face: arms tied for hours, collective beds with 20 bodies, a clock that seemed to tick faster when someone cried. The shifts recorded numbers, the personal notebooks, when they existed, recorded stories. And it was the stories that hurt. Between the 1960s and 1970s, global psychiatry was going through a period of aggressive experiments. In Adauto, the echo of that time came in the form of shock therapies and desensitization treatments without adequate anesthesia, recorded with bureaucratic precision and human gaps. The scientific justification spoke of reorganizing circuits. The patient's body spoke of convulsions that crossed the room. An isolation wing was located in a less trafficked part of the pavilion. On the official map, it was Sector D. On the mental map of the old employees, it was the cold corridor. Peg doors, thin mattresses, a high window that looked out onto nothing. Those considered agitated, often simply desperate, were admitted here. Isolation could last 12 hours, 2 days, 1 week, until it stabilizes, they said. Stabilize what? The pain, the scream. In parallel, there was the file wooden boxes, manila folders, cardboard index cards. When a name disappeared from a report, it appeared as transferred. When it didn't appear anywhere, it was noted as no return. No return became a noun, almost a diagnosis. Some former employees speak of internal auditors who asked for record optimization, and after these visits, certain folders were moved or disappeared. In the middle of this labyrinth, good people resisted. A nursing technician kept small notes with names and dates in her purse, so she wouldn't forget who they were. A young doctor crossed out doses, wrote no indication, and argued with superiors. A social worker tried to locate families and stumbled upon returned letters, broken addresses, and accents from other cities. Still, protocol won. Not because it was correct, but because it was the official language. And the official language, at that time, had the power to transform wounds into statistics. Administrative reasons. That phrase, plastered on the iron door, fueled conversations for decades. Some said the floor gave way, others that there were incidents with equipment. What crossed the lips of the ancients was simpler and harsher. Nobody wanted to talk of what was happening inside. The wing was at the end of a curved corridor, after a bend that seemed to have been designed to hide the very existence of the place. In the official registry it lost its name. It became an acronym. And acronyms are perfect for sheltering what one doesn't want to explain. In times of tight budgets and long lines, experiments gained another word. Study on inspection days, the beds were lined up, the materials collected, the lights turned on. But the ward had a distinct smell, a mixture of ether, damp cloth, and rust. Fragmented reports point to non-standardized procedures, off-label drug combinations, shock sessions with imprecise intervals, containment tests that lasted longer than any norm would admit. You don't have to believe in ghosts to understand why, at night, many people said they heard footsteps in the band. They were memories of living people that the city preferred to forget. There were attempts to open the windows. Metaphorical and real small groups of family members pressured the administration, demanding complete medical records, explanations for bruises, and justifications for prolonged hospitalizations without a ruling. Some were granted longer visits, others only silence. At one point, photographs internal, made by anonymous hands, empty hallways with marks on the floor, rooms with electrodes stored in unlabeled boxes, bulletin boards with torn notices. The images disappeared as quickly as they appeared. The employees who spoke in to close the wing ended up being moved to other sectors for adaptation. Those who remained adapted their outlook. They learned to listen less, to suffer less. It's a survival mechanism that takes the place of consciousness when other people's pain becomes a landscape. And Adauto's landscape, at that time, was an emotional map of evasions. The phrase administrative reasons remained stuck firmly, as if it could hold the wall together. What it actually held together was a collective secret. The decision not to look at the same point for too long, so that the point would not look back. In the North Pavilion, the sound of rain mingled with the voices. This was where the patients considered chronic, those who, according to the reports, showed no therapeutic progress, were housed. In other words, the forgotten. The rooms were shared with 20 beds in a row. The smell of ether and mildew mingled with that of cold food. In the mornings, a staff member would walk by with a clipboard, writing down only the bed number, not the name. From that moment on, people became codes. Among the preserved records is a 36-year-old woman admitted in 1968. The medical record says hysteria crisis. A former nurse's statement says talked excessively about her absent husband. Another file for a man describes a state of agitation due to manic disorder. The handwritten comment on the back says, shouted her daughter's name throughout the procedure. These notes, simple and nearly faded, are all that remains of real life that the paper could not hide. Beginning in the 1970s, medical students began interning at Adauto. Many entered with idealism and left in silence. One wrote decades later, "The first week, I thought I could help. The second, I realized I could only observe. The third, I realized the hospital was observing." There was something inhuman about that automatic routine, the way the inmates stared at the wall as if it might respond. Sometimes a song would drift down the hallway, and for a few seconds the place seemed suspended between lucidity and delirium. But soon someone would turn off the light and reality would return, cold, organized, bureaucratic. As voice continued, some asked for discharge, others just a reminder. And little by little, they began to arrive cards from family members who never received a reply, letters asking for news, containing photographs of grown children, promising visits. Many were archived without delivery. Others were burned for safekeeping. Adauto Botelho became every day not just a hospital but archive of interrupted memories. And among all those voices, there was one that no one could forget, that of a patient who one night wrote on the wall of his makeshift cell a phrase that still haunts those who saw it. "I am here, but the world does not know." In the 80s, the country began to talk about psychiatric reform, but within the walls of Adauto Botelho, time moved at a different pace. Reports said everything was improving, but the corridors remained the same, damp, narrow, and with the same metallic smell. It was during this period that first internal complaints began to emerge. Small diary entries, letters hidden in lab coat pockets, voice recordings made with old-fashioned devices. Everything started from within, and everything quickly disappeared. A newly graduated doctor, identified only as Dr. C in documents leaked years later, allegedly submitted a dossier to the Regional Medical Council reporting conduct incompatible with hospital ethics. Among the evidence was the description of unregistered shock sessions and patients subjected to experimental injections coming from private laboratories. The dossier was never officially registered. According to reports, it was intercepted by the hospital management itself before reaching the capital. The professionals who tried to speak suffered sudden transfers. Nurse with 20 years of service was assigned overnight to a cleaning department. A social worker took leave due to emotional issues after her home was broken into and documents were searched. The stories multiplied, but none received the letterhead that made them real. Meanwhile, families continued to search for names no longer in the records. Some discovered that the patient had been discharged months earlier, though no one knew where they had gone. Others received generic death certificates with impossible causes, cardiorespiratory arrest resulting from acute psychological collapse. No body, no coffin, just the signature of someone who often had never even met the patient. The town began to whisper. Shopkeepers said trucks were leaving at dawn for vacant lots. Others swore they heard in the early winter hours the sound of gates opening and closing more than once. City officials dismissed it all as an urban legend, but those who lived near the hospital knew legends. They were just a way for fear to keep breathing. Even in the face of silence, the evidence began to pile up. Medical records with the same handwriting on different pages, records with retroactive dates, medications imported without health surveillance oversight. It was a puzzle no one seemed willing to solve. And among the many erased stories, one began to stand out. That of a patient whose name appeared and disappeared in the files as if he had never existed. A man who, according to witnesses, was still seen walking through the corridors even after he was officially declared dead. His name appears in only 3 official documents, but in all of them it is spelled differently. In one it is spelled as Luis A.M., in another Luis Amado, and in the third just Patient 247. No birth dates match, no relatives have been identified. Even so, there is signatures in medical reports as if he himself had consented to participate in something. The older employees swore they'd seen that man. Tall, thin, always with a distant look in his eyes, he walked slowly through the corridors of the North Ward. No one knew when he'd arrived or which wing he belonged. 2. A security guard said he'd just been there when he was hired. A nurse claimed he saw him every morning, sitting motionless on the same bed, staring at the wall. When internal audits began in 1986, the name Louise A.M. was listed among the patients deceased, but according to the timesheet, the body never passed through the infirmary or the autopsy room. Perhaps a recording error, the administrator said. But the problem was that the error persisted. The following month, new employees reported seeing an unidentified inmate walking through the closed corridors. The mystery grew when the maintenance team found, during a renovation, a room sealed from the inside with a mattress on the floor and a phrase written on the wall: "Don't erase my name again." No one admitted opening the room. No records indicated anyone lived there. Management ordered the area immediately closed off, for security reasons. Over the next few months, the atmosphere at the hospital became unbearable. Nurses requested transfers, patients had unexplained seizures, and even doctors began avoiding the late-night shift. Recently installed internal cameras were recording shadows crossing the empty corridors, and technicians claimed that the sensors were triggered by movements with no visible source. For those who believed only in facts, it was all just coincidence, but those who had worked at Adauto for years knew there the past never went away. It just changed shape. The first official inspections arrived at Adauto Botelho Hospital in 1988, brought about by a new wave of complaints from the local press. Management tried to anticipate the situation. They painted hallways, replaced mattresses, and collected medical records under review, but it was too late. Inspection teams found unventilated wards, expired medications, and duplicate medical records. A prosecutor described the place as a labyrinth of paperwork and secrets. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, panic was growing. Senior nurses feared reprisals, younger doctors began speaking to reporters, and family members crowded the lobby with faded photos in their hands. Within a week, 60 search requests by patients transferred without a destination. Some of these names reappeared in files from other states, but with no transport record, no date, no body. Just names reappearing as if they had never left the paper. Among the inspectors, a woman, Dr. Eliane Couto, a psychologist and psychiatric reform activist, was the one who insisted on entering the sealed ward. Management cited a risk of contamination and a power outage. She entered anyway, with a flashlight and 2 assistants. Inside, she found the floor covered in dust, old bed marks, and something no one could explain. 10 identical medical records with the same name, Louise A.M., and different diagnoses. "It's as if they were trying to erase someone by repeating them until they disappear," she later wrote in a letter sent to the Ministry of Health. The impact of the discovery was swift, but the reaction was slow. Investigations were fragmented, shelved, reopened, and forgotten again. The hospital continued to operate, albeit with closed wards and reduced staff. Some doctors resigned, others were promoted. The press lost interest, and the population of Curitiba learned to live with the rumor, the hospital that hid its dead. Even with the partial closure in the 1990s, former employees claimed that the North Wing was never demolished at night. The building remains silent, but neighbors still report hearing metallic noises and seeing lights flickering in the broken windows. No one officially confirms this, and those who try to investigate come away different. The Adauto Botelho Hospital still exists, although much of its wings have been decommissioned. The name was kept, but the structure has changed. New buildings, new rooms, new walls to try to hide the old ones. Those who pass by the avenue can't imagine what those walls once heard. However, on the coldest nights, residents swear they feel the same wind that blew through the corridors 40 years ago, a heavy air mixed with the smell of ether and dust. In public records, the case remains fragmented. The investigations concluded without any culprits, classified as administrative inconsistencies. The surviving reports speak of cataloging errors and operational errors. No direct mention of the missing, not a single line about the experiments. Time, once again, has served as an anesthetic for collective memory, but every now and then a new piece emerges. A note found in an old book, an audio recording on a tape recorder, a photograph lost in a university collection. These are fragments of what was erased, and together they form the face of a truth the country still avoids facing. The most disturbing thing, however, is not in the documents. It is in what keeps happening. Employees at current facilities report hearing footsteps in disused hallways, seeing lights turn on by themselves, and feeling doors lock when they're alone at night. None of them speak openly, but between glances and silences, they all repeat the same phrase. Some stories don't end with demolition. Adauto Botelho has become a symbol of psychiatric reform, but also a living reminder of a time when madness was used as a pretext for oblivion. The voices that echo there are not just ghosts. They are memories demanding their right to exist. And perhaps that is why, even after so many years, those who approach those gates still feel something strange, a presence that observes in silence, as if the hospital itself, tired of keeping secrets, was waiting for someone finally heard.